And I started first grade at Worth Heights Elementary School in 1963. And in that year, we, among other things, learned some math. And we did addition and subtraction, which really wasn't so bad. But in the second grade, 1964, they introduced us to multiplication and division. And I got to tell you, that's a lot more complicated. Now, the multiplication, the only bad thing about it was you had to memorize multiplication tables. Guys, this was before calculators and cell phones. This is 1964. So we memorized the tables. I didn't like it, but I could do it. But division, simple division was bad enough, but long division, you had to carry numbers. You had to borrow. It was just wrong. And I got to tell you, I know some of you love numbers, but we can't all be Caleb's, can we? We can't all be Williams. I could do it. I could do public school math. But I didn't particularly like it. Now, division can be a good thing. They tell me that if you are a shareholder, that when stocks divide, that's a good thing. If a stock splits. Military strategists have discovered that dividing and conquering is a good strategy. Probably if you have some money saved toward retirement, your financial counselor has told you to divide your assets because it helps protect them. If there's anything Enron taught us, it was that. I mean, that's good. Boy, a lot of times it's not good. And we could think of a lot of examples here. We could all pitch in. When division happens in a family, it's not good. When division happens in a marriage, every once in a while you say, oh no, my husband and I, we just divorced and we were just the best of friends. Oh, shut up. Somebody always gets hurt in that. That's a painful thing. There are areas in life we just don't want to be divided. So I want to talk a little bit this morning about division where Jesus Christ is concerned, because it's there. So I want you to hang with me. Two thoughts. First, we know a world of division. We're so used to it, sometimes we hardly see it. Do you know, everything began in the Garden of Eden. And I know some people think that's a myth, but God doesn't treat it that way, and Jesus didn't treat it that way. There was this garden, and you talk about union. Man had it with God in the garden. Perfect harmony. You had a husband and wife who never disagreed. There was never a spat. My wife and I, we've had it tested. We have the same temperament and the same secondary temperament. Very unusual for married couples. And the truth is, when we got married a little over 42 years ago, we didn't have a hard first year. So some people say, oh man, that first year's tough. We were just like old people, been married a long time. But we do not enjoy perfect union. I got to tell you, no, I don't. Those of you who have been married need no explanation. And those of you who have not yet, and you just see yourselves looking into one another's eyes in raptured bliss every morning over coffee, well, keep on living. But what happened is sin entered the picture. And there was immediate division. Well, you go to Genesis 3, and God stepped into the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and Eve weren't there to meet him. You know where they were? They were hiding. Division, separation, judgment. And that division's never been rectified. It's never been corrected. In fact, by the next generation, rebellion was open. Cain has committed murder just a few years later. And now we live in a world, we see it everywhere. There are political divisions, cultural divisions. We were talking in our Sunday school class this morning that we were talking about how Ruth, the book of Ruth, how that Naomi had a boy named Mahlon and a boy named Chilion, which meant unhealthy and puny. Now, and we talked about this. Hebrew names, we hear them, and it wasn't like they said David and everybody said, oh, that means beloved. When they said David, they heard beloved. Those names were Hebrew words. So Mom walked out and said, beloved, beloved, dinner time. When you heard Esau, you heard Red. Red, we've probably all known somebody named Red. Can you imagine Mom stepping out the front door and saying, unhealthy, puny? Why did they do that? And we're talking about that. Why would somebody name their kids that? I don't know. It's a cultural thing we don't understand. If you named your kid puny or unhealthy, some people would talk to you to your face, but most people talk behind your back. They say, are they crazy? Why would she do that? They did it. And unhealthy and puny both died. Of course, everybody in that story's dead, right? Well, it's a cultural divide. Cultural divides are very real. There are language divides, there are racial divides. Even sports teams are in divisions. It just seems like everything is divided, and don't even get me started on religion. Talk about division. We humans are divided people, and nobody can fix it. Man, you got these politicians, they say, put me in office, I'll fix that division. No, you won't. I think you would if you could, but you won't. Some of you have divided opinions about what I've just said. We are divided. Listen, Jesus Christ highlights division. I mean, it seems he divided as much as he reconciled. He came to reconcile us to God, but he divided. Do you know, our calendars are divided by his birth, aren't they? When I grew up, it was A.D. and B.C., before Christ. I remember when I worked in a bank through college. I was in Bible college, and I'm working through the bank, and there was this girl named Becky that worked with us, and Becky she was a good girl. She was not a Christian. And one day, I don't know why I told her this, but I told her, Anno Domini means you dummy in Latin. Well, it means in the year of our Lord, but I told her that, and I forgot about it. And later on, she worked what they call the deal drawer, and when you go to the bank and they push that drawer out, and she's talking to this person she knows, and she said, you Anno Domini. And the guy just looked at her, and I thought, uh-oh. So after he left, I said, Becky, it doesn't mean you dummy. And I had to straighten that out. I think she's still angry with me. I don't know how many people she called Anno Domini. But what it means is our calendar is divided before and after Christ's birth. Now, the secular scholars have changed that to BCC, before the Common Era, trying to erase that. But guess what that calendar is based on? I mean, you can call it before paper napkins if you want, but it is still divides by his birth. We count our time from before and after. He's a divider. Do you know the Old and New Testaments, or the Old and New Covenants? It was Jesus that said, this is the covenant in my blood. You know what the dividing line in those covenants is? It's Jesus Christ. It's not John the Baptist. It's not Eleazar or any of those. It's Jesus. He is our divider. People were divided during his ministry. Let me read you a couple of verses. John 7, verse 43 says this. So there was a division among the people because of him. Well, who'd have thought? John 9:16, therefore some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath. Others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such things? And there was division among them. The Pharisees were divided. John 10:19, therefore there was a division again among the Jews because of these sayings. He was a divider. His death and resurrection really divided people. And that's where I've been headed. Jesus Christ came to a spiritually dead, lost humanity. Now, I know there are divided opinions among that. I know there's a school of thought today that people are just good, that we're just good, and if you'll just fan that flame, they'll be good. All they need is a little education, all they need is a little information, and they'll just be good. I always think, what planet do you live on? We're not. In fact, if there's anything we've learned is if you'll give people an inch, you betcha. He took our place. He was our substitute to bring us light and life. We're told in John 1 that He was the light that came into the world. And His light was the life of men. He came to do what we could never do for ourselves. He came when we didn't ask. We talked this morning as we began the study of Ruth about how it is the one biblical example of the law of the kinsman redeemer. And how important that is to us now because Jesus did everything according to the law. Galatians 4:4 says, when the fullness of the time was come, when the time was appropriate, that God sent forth His Son, made of a woman, made under the law. And He did everything according to the law. The substitution was according to the law. You watch Him and watch His life, and He absolutely fulfilled everything the Old Testament pictured. And one of the reasons He could do that on our behalf is because He was our near kinsman. He was human. And He was willing, and He was able. Now, a lot of people might be willing, but not everybody's able. He was able. And because of His sinless life and because He was God in flesh, He died in our place and took our punishment and paid our sin debt. Nobody else could do that. But that life that He bought for us is a gift that must be received. It's not automatic. If you go back in the Old Testament, those offerings that were offered on a Levitical altar were effective for a little while, but they were only effective to the people that offered. And here's what John said in John 3, verse 19. He said, this is the condemnation. This is what condemns people. That the light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. You know, when we won't come to Jesus Christ, it's not an intellectual problem. I hear that all the time. Well, I have certain intellectual problems. No, you don't. You have a heart problem. Your problem's not with what you're thinking, it's with what you love. They wouldn't come to the light because they didn't want light. They love darkness. They want cover. People love the wrong things. And thus there's this big division. It's a bad fracture in humanity because we have light, but there's a large segment of society that doesn't want that light. Just leave me alone. And notice where that takes us. Matthew 25, here's what it says. All nations will be gathered before Him. That word nations is interesting. I'm not sure why they translate it that way. It's a Greek word called ethnos. Ethnos. And what it means is people groups. It has no political connotation at all, and that's the way we take it. So the Americans will be there, and the Canadians, and of course those people from Mexico. And that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is all people groups. So it doesn't matter whether you're Caucasian or Asian or Native American or African or Indian or Arab or whatever, all ethnos will stand before him. Everyone. Well, what about them people that ain't never heard? All nations. All people will stand before him. They will be gathered before him, and he will separate them. Well, that sounds like division. He'll separate them one from another as a shepherd divides his sheep from goats. They tell us, and I am not a sheep herder. Agricultural stuff is so outside of my paradigm. I grew up in suburbia. I have told you that before. I grew up eating margarine. I grew up on canned biscuits. I've heard so many lectures on how much better drop biscuits are. Not if you grew up on canned biscuits. I prefer canned biscuits. I grew up that way. I grew up eating meat, but I thought it came in cellophane. I didn't know they killed something to get it until I was older. And I remember hearing my mom talk about them butchering hogs and wringing chicken necks. And I've never done it before, and I don't want to do it again. That is not my world. My world is very sanitized. So what do I know about raising sheep? What I've read. But here's something I've read, and I'm guessing it's true, is that those shepherds tended to run a few goats with their sheep. And they did that because of this. Sheep are dumb, and goats are smart. And it was easier to deal with the flock if you had a few goats in there. Because the sheep are too dumb to know the difference. And they would follow the goats, and you could really lead a flock better with goats in it. But the day came when you sheared sheep, or whatever, you had to separate out the goats. And we're told that one of these days, now believe me, when Matthew 25 was written and that was said, everybody there knew, oh yeah, they knew exactly what that was. They knew how you ran goats. They knew how you ran sheep. He will separate them one from another as a shepherd divides his sheep from goats. So there's a pretty long passage on that. Verse 46 says this, these shall go away into everlasting punishment, goats, but the righteous into everlasting life. Division. The ultimate division is eternal. And I know that's tough. I've had to process through that. Would God really judge people that way? Especially people that aren't so bad, right? We all know people that aren't so bad. See, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Our problem is we don't have a really good concept of sin. We tend to think of sin as, well, nobody's perfect. Pastor, I know this may come as a surprise to you, but I'm not perfect. No surprise to me. None of us are. But that's not our issue. Our issue is not that we aren't perfect. God will not judge us because we're just the best we can be, but somehow somebody left a little crack in the paint. It doesn't work that way. Our problem is not a flaw or an imperfection. It's sin in the face of a holy God. And we keep comparing ourselves among ourselves. And that's not wise. In a few weeks, I'm speaking at a men's retreat. I'm speaking on Friday night, and I'm speaking on Saturday morning. And I've roughed out my Saturday morning lesson. And here's really what I'm dealing with. And I hope nobody at that retreat listens to these things. When I was in school, especially in college, not so much. When I was in regular high school, I always took the dodo classes anyway, so this wasn't so applicable. But when I was in college, I can remember going into a class. Some of you remember this, and the professor gives this unreasonably hard test, and nobody can get it, and a lot of people fail it. It doesn't reach the bell curve at all. And some of you have experienced this. The highest grade in class is like a 92. And you got a Korean in there, right? And the highest grade is a 92. And so what the prof would do is grade on a curve, which means that 92 gets raised to 100 and everybody's grade goes up 8 points. That's how the curve worked. So if the highest grade was 85, everybody's grade goes up 15 points. I can remember looking around and seeing some super smart person and thinking, well, there goes the curve. That person makes 100 on everything. And I think we believe God deals with us that way. He kind of grades on a curve. And so we look around and we say, well, I may not be perfect, but I'm better than David by a long shot. Right? No amens on that. But you know what I mean. And we all hear this. Well, at least I'm not that guy's fat alcoholic mother. I may not be great, but I may be fat, but I'm not alcoholic. And we go on with this, and we compare ourselves. There's always somebody that doesn't compare well with you. And we think God will look at us that way, and when we stand before Him, He's going to say, well, you're not so bad. I just talked to a guy named Adolf, and he was a lot worse than you, and I think you're going to be... It doesn't work that way. God doesn't grade on a curve. And we stand before Him as rebellious sinners, thinking, well, I think maybe the good deeds I've done outweigh the bad deeds. It doesn't work that way. The wages of sin is death. And we've all sinned, and we come short. And we think, well, I don't think sin is so bad. But it's not. It's not by vote. And a problem for us and with us is this. We are all in one group or the other. There's a dividing line, and we can't be in both groups. We are either sheep or goats. And there's a difference. So the big question for us is this. What group are you in? Because you're in one or the other. You see, righteousness before God is what we call imputed. That's the biblical word. It is imputed. You do not have enough on your own. Here's what God says. It says it in Isaiah 64, that we're all as the unclean thing, is the opening of the verse, and it says, all our righteousnesses, not at our worst, not our sins, not our imperfections, not our flaws, all our righteousnesses, the best we are at the best time. What's the best you've ever been? All our righteousnesses are as filthy rags. He said, as good as you can be, you are not nearly good enough. The best we can be is somehow, because we are totally depraved, which is what the Bible teaches, the best we can be is sullied. It is always somehow adulterated with wrong. Proverbs says the plowing of the wicked is sin. What that says is even when a man is working hard to support his family, there is an impurity in there. Well, I know people that always do good. Even when they do good, there is impurity mixed in. Did you know that the Food and Drug Administration have standards for how much impurity can be in your food? this is going to be a lovely thought. For instance, peanut butter, and I like peanut butter. There is a standard for how much rat hair can be in peanut butter. Here we go. Yes, sir, I told you. And they allow up to a certain percentage of rat hair in your peanut butter because you cannot keep all the rats out of the peanut butter vat. Yeah, eat up. I do too. I have known this for a long time, but I choose not to think about it. But it is impossible to make that much peanut butter and keep it totally pure. So they have to put an amount, and it's not much. You're not going to find a rat hair in your peanut butter, I hope. If so, I'm telling you, go from Peter Pan to Jif or whatever you're doing. But here's the thing. No matter how hard we try, nothing is totally unadulterated. We've just learned what we can put up with. And so we're thinking, I don't know if I can ever eat peanut butter again. Well, it hadn't hurt you so far. So what you didn't know didn't hurt you. And it's really a small amount. It's somewhere around 5%. No, it's like way small. Like 1 part in a million or something. I mean, it's just, you may get a bottle here and there that has none at all. You can all hope. And we are accustomed to that. We're just accustomed to it, and we think it's fine. But it's not. And so when you take our good deeds, and they are how many parts sin? Well, I did that for them. How much of that was for your own glory? How much of that was to make you feel? We've heard it all before. They interview somebody that comes back from building wells in Africa, and instead of, you don't hear this, man, it was rough and it was miserable, but I love those people and it was worth it. What you hear is, I cannot tell you how good that made me feel. I just feel so good. Me. There's always a little adulteration. They're doing a good thing. Volunteer. It makes you feel better. It's what we are. So, if we're going to stand before God as righteous, it must be imputed to us. And that's what salvation is about. We have this perfect Son of God and this imperfect son of Adam. And at my best, I'm not nearly good enough, and at my worst. But the righteousness of Christ is imputed to me. God takes that righteousness and He lays it to my account, and I can stand before God as righteous. We're told in Genesis that Abraham believed God and it was accounted to him as righteousness. Well, it wasn't righteousness. Belief is not righteousness. It's trust, but Abraham wasn't righteous. You follow his life. He messed up a lot. But God counted that for what it wasn't. It was imputed to him. And that's quoted 3 times in the New Testament. So again, Jesus Christ is the great divider. This time between life and death, literally and eternally. When He was on earth, He divided people. He's divided our calendar. He's divided our covenants. But He also divides people between life and death. And so the big question again is, what group are we in? Are you a follower of Jesus Christ? Because you're following somebody. You're following something. Oh, yes, you are. Well, I don't think so, preacher. I'm totally independent. Then you're following your independence. You're following something. And if you're following something, you're going to be led somewhere. You're on a path that will go somewhere. Where are you going? The Bible says in Him is life. We're told in John 14, he said this to Thomas. He had told him, he said, don't be troubled. He said, I'm going away. And he said, don't be troubled. You believe in God, so your faith in me is well placed. He said, my Father's house, a lot of dwelling places. He said, I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if I go, and I will, I'm going to come again. And his disciples, who were expecting him to set up a kingdom, said, where are you going? And he said, the way I'm going, and he said, you know where I'm going? And they said, how can we know where we're going? And how can we know the way? We don't know. I think it was Thomas that asked that question. So Jesus said, anyway. And Jesus said, Thomas, have you been so long with me so long that you don't know? Here's what he said, I'm the way. You want to be on the right path? I'm the path. It's me. It's not my teaching. It's not what people say about me. It's me. Preacher, don't you have to be in the right church? No. I mean, it's a good thing. But salvation's not in your church. It's in Jesus Christ. I'm the way. Well, preacher, don't I have to follow the right rituals? No. Not that that's a bad thing. But salvation, rescue, life is in a person. It's in Jesus Christ. Well, don't I have to... my mom always told me that I shouldn't dance, swear, cuss, or chew, and I shouldn't run with the girls that do. Ain't that true? Well, I've been married to Donna for 42 years. No, I'm kidding, please. And if I want her to know I said that, I'll tell her. But no. I think we get off on the wrong things. There's an old poem that said, my mama taught me not to smoke. I don't. Or listen to a dirty joke. I don't. I kiss no girls, not even one. I will not stay where it is done. You may think I don't have much fun. I don't. Isn't that a great poem? That should be Scripture. Yeah. We get so involved in our rules, and we think those rules are our path. In fact, we begin to think they're the destination. Jesus is the path. Preacher, you mean there won't be any restrictions? No, there are. There are things He doesn't want you to do, and there are things that He wants you to do. But they're not the road. He's the road. I've been on some rough roads. I've been on some narrow roads, so have you. It's sure good if it's the right road. So which group are you? Would you bow your heads with me?